Hi, I'm Greg Schaffer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Tatiana Argueta joins us today. She is a senior security engineer with over 15 years of experience spanning cybersecurity operations, risk management, automation, and creative problem solving. She holds a master's degree in cybersecurity from Georgia Tech. She's also very involved in Toastmasters. Tatiana, thank you so much for joining me today, and hopefully this time you can hear me.
Good morning, Greg. Thank you for having me. And yes,
I
I
was
can hear you.
I am so happy about that because for the first time in like 230 times doing this, started the recording, did the intro like that, started talking, and all I could hear is you saying, Greg, I can't hear you. I can see you, but I can't hear you. So I guess it's the
Fun
first time for
things.
everything, but I'm really, really glad that we got it worked out. I appreciate you taking the time to join me this morning. Would love to hear about your career path, about how and why you got into cyber, and just bring us up to where you're at today.
Sure, yes. Just a little note on the intro. I'm not done with my master's yet. I'm still working on it at Georgia Tech.
Very good.
Yes. So I've had a bit of a non-traditional path into cybersecurity, if you may say. Since a young age, I developed a big passion for social matters. So after graduating high school, one of my first careers that I pursued in university was political science, international relations, marketing. I was combining quite a few things there. And then I found myself in a position where I had to move and then whether trying to continue the path I was in or change into something else, which got me into web and interactive media design. Now, when I was cursing that program, I had a requirement to do an internship, which I was able to do it with Citgo Petroleum over in Houston.
Mhm.
And that internship got me into their marketing team. We worked on optimizing some of the websites, working on analytics, customer experience, a little bit of everything, government, public affairs, communications, things like that. And an opportunity opened up at the company I was in for assistant security analyst. Honestly, part of why I got into it, it was because I felt like I was a little bit stuck in the role I was in. Excuse me. So I saw it as a way to learn and have fun learning something new, right? I was listening to your podcast last night, and you always mention this is about learning new things and having fun, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's pretty much my motto, I think, as well. So that got me into security, and I really liked it. It was an extremely demanding job, but I had great colleagues, quite experts, very knowledgeable, and they were able to transfer all of that into me, which allowed me to, as you know, become a CISSP eventually. And that's when I realized that security was my thing. So since then, that's what I've been trying to do, just strengthen my security skills, especially because I didn't have that formal academic background. Like I learned everything on the job or informal training. And that's why I got into Georgia Tech to get the master's as well.
So you mentioned the CISSP, and I
Yes.
have to say that that was probably the hardest test. And I've taken some hard tests, but that was a very, very difficult test. Maybe it wasn't the hardest, but it was one of the hardest. And I did it about 20 years ago. And I'm just wondering, A, did you find it as difficult as I did, or was I just stupid? And B, how did you prep for it?
Oh, okay. So honestly, it was challenging. I think most of it for me was just fear. I'm not a great test taker. I also, like I mentioned, learned a lot of it on the job, hands on. So I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to really keep up with the lingo and everything. But I kind of took it upon myself to almost test myself, right? Like, is this what I'm going to do? Am I good enough? And testing. And at the end of it, if anything, I could learn about my knowledge gaps and see where I need to go, right? But I mostly prepped through some of the formal education through ISC Square. particularly practice tests, I think were one of the best tools that I used. And some YouTube videos for sure. There's a guy, I don't know if I can mention names here, but
Sure.
okay.
Just so
There's
long
a
as they're
guy.
complimentary. We don't want to say anything bad
There you
about people.
go. No, of course not. There's a guy on YouTube that has some of the best material, the best content out there. Pete Zerger. I hope I'm not mispronouncing the last name. But if I had to recommend somebody somewhere to start, he is really great. He has videos where he goes into specific domain topics and all the nitty-gritty of the things, and he has a crush course that is just fantastic.
I'll have to look that up. But I did sort of the same. A lot of the self-study. I didn't do a boot camp for the CISSP, but you mentioned gaps. One of the interesting things that I found when I did the CISSP is that the domain that I thought I was going to be the strongest in wasn't. And so I was networking prior, and I think you were too, doing some networking stuff. And I had been in networking for the first half of my career, or the first 15 years or so. And it was risk management that I was the most solid in. And that actually did help me to understand maybe I need to pivot my career there. And eventually I did and went down the CISO path. Did you find that what you thought was going to be your strongest wasn't your strongest domain?
Yes, I think so. In a matter. I think one of the biggest challenges too is trying to unlearn, quote unquote, those bad habits that we get from the companies that we work on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we put that into the industry terms? And more specifically, since we're talking about an ISC Square certification, how does that organization look at it, right? Which is the key point here, because at the end of the day, we are testing on their examination on how they look at security and how they bring it together as a systems design organization.
And so I apologize for my mistake at the beginning of the podcast. It's my vast staff messed up with the show prep notes, the vast staff meaning ChatGPT. So if anybody's wondering, my secret to my success here is that I utilize ChatGPT to help me with the show prep, and sometimes they get it a little bit wrong. And in this case, you said that you are working on your master's at Georgia Tech, but from someone I worked on and got my master's at Middle Tennessee State in information systems, sort of like the same thing, not the same degree that you're doing, but the same process. And one of the things I found was that it's very difficult to work full time, have the responsibilities of everything that you do in life, and also go back to school and pursue an advanced degree. You got any tips on how to do that?
Honestly, I guess it does take a lot of discipline, right? But most importantly, personally, I think it's not necessarily as difficult if you're into something that you really like, which for me has helped a lot. Additionally, my program, it's quite convenient. It's online, and I am still working full-time and studying, but also I'm able to apply everything that I'm learning day to day in my day-to-day work, and that truly, truly helps.
So, is it fair to say that in your 15 years experience, you've worked in several different industries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and most of them have been regulated. I'm again relying upon my assistant that I think I'm going to fire after this. You were in energy and healthcare, which are both two highly regulated industries, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So a lot of the times I tell folks, and particularly in the virtual CISO world, when I going out there trying to sell our product and our services, one of my go-to lines is like, security is pretty much the same across industries. Maybe the acronyms are different, but for the most part, security is the same. But it isn't quite true when I said it. I'm not really lying. I'm explaining from a baseline perspective. But when you get really into the weeds, particularly when you're talking about regulated industries, there are some significant changes, particularly around the security risk area. I'm just curious, in your experience, what are some of those changes that you see when you go to different regulated industries as far as information security risk?
Yes. So I think obviously it's about the context, right? And specifically for those two industries that we're talking about, I think the types of threats don't necessarily change, but it's mostly about how the risk is defined and how it's tolerated, basically, and enforced in a company. For example, in the healthcare industry, you would expect that availability and patient safety are the priority, and how we define and manage that risk, right? Versus if you look at the energy or critical infrastructure industry, it's a little bit more about resilient and operational continuity, right? And sometimes perhaps things like privacy and things like that wouldn't have a big score as they would on industries like healthcare or something that deals with a lot more sensitive data. Yeah, so I would probably say that's the biggest one. And from that context perspective, it's also the culture, right? And how people prioritize the risk, the safety, and the regulatory requirements around them.
Well, I know one of the challenges for any security program, and this isn't limited to large organizations, small organizations have it as well, and maybe different aspects of it, but it's you touched on culture, and culture is so much driven from the top, and the top, you have to have buy-in from the top, from the C-suite and from the board, and sometimes it's a difficult sell to the executives as far as the importance of information security and how it affects the business. How do you find a way to be effective to get buy-in when talking basically to folks that don't really speak our language in information security on a daily basis, but that they need to understand the risks that the organization is involved with regards to their information?
Sure. I think buy-in is always going to come from understanding, right? And everybody has a different angle or a different role that they're fulfilling in their company. Particularly for leadership, I think it's all about the outcome, right? They want to know about how is your revenue impacted, and beyond the operational disruptions, what are the consequences? And then for leadership, it's about scaling and reliability and that technical debt reduction as well, right? And learning how to prioritize all these competing needs that we have, because that's how security works, right? And the premise is we can never get rid of any risk for real, but we learn to manage it and prioritize it, right? So if we really want to get that buy-in from leadership, I think it's best to frame it into terms that they would truly understand. And that often comes to not necessarily focusing on the controls that we're placing in the processes and the business processes, but more about the impact on that revenue and the outcomes as a business in the end, because businesses are here to generate revenue, right?
Right. They're not here to give us a playing field to work with cool tools and all
exactly.
that. Sometimes it seems that way. But as security professionals, then, what's our responsibility in this process? You're talking about that we need to talk in terms of the business. Doesn't that then put upon us the responsibility of understanding what the business does and some of the strategic plans and aspects and goals of the business, and even just have an understanding of business communication terms?
Indeed. Yes, for sure. I think the biggest way to sum up the role for security practitioners here at the operational level, I think, is, like you said, definitely we need to understand our business, right? So understand your business, understand your users, which are not necessarily the same context. They might be the same people. The business employees are part of the business processes and they're going to be your users. But what I mean by that is the business process has defined roles for people, but people are people, and people might be having a bad day, might be having this or that. And in your day-to-day, you have to learn to deal with things like that, right? So understanding your business, understanding your users, understand the technology that you have, and most definitely understand your data, right? Especially if we're talking about telemetry and things like that in security.
Communication is also so important in this
course.
sense. You know, I like to point out that, you know, the good Lord gave us 2 eyes and 2 ears and just 1 mouth, so use them proportionally or something along those lines. But in all seriousness, you know, we talk about certifications in our field. We talked a little bit about the CISSP beforehand, but one of the most impactful certifications that I've gotten in my career, I've talked about this before in the podcast, is nothing to do technical, and it's from Toastmasters. Back then, I don't know what they do now. I think they pivoted at some point in time, but back then, the 2 main ones leading in, you first earn the competent communicator and then the competent leader. And the reason why I say that is not so much, people think about Toastmasters and they think, well, it helps to get you to speak better. And it does. I will catch myself with the filler words every now and then. I'm trying intentionally really to do it right now because so is my filler word. I will say so too many times. So, hey, you know, that sort of stuff. But really what Toastmasters did, at least for me, was really help me listen and help me. It helps me listen, help me to process, help me to remove the idea that I have to be thinking about what I'm going to be responding while the other person's talking, because you learn to think on your feet, like through the tabletops, and being able to enunciate and to get your point across quickly, which I'm not doing right now, is another aspect of it too. With the whatever they used to call those 2-minute speeches that we did this. I think it was tabletops. I don't remember.
Oh, yes.
I'm just curious. I know that you did some Toastmasters work earlier in your career, and were part of the. You held one of the positions, the office. I did too. I think I was like education, and it was tough. I think it was the toughest one. But I'm curious from your perspective, because I've sat on this podcast and say Toastmasters is great. You should go out and think about doing it. And yet now I have someone here who's actually been through Toastmasters. Did it help you any in your career, or and if so, how did it help you? And if not, just tell me I'm way off base.
No, and actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that now that I think about it. I'm going to start with this because I don't want to forget. This is one of the reasons why I got into security, actually, because of Toastmasters. When I was in the Toastmasters team at Citgo, that's where I was in the vice president of communications role and a member as well. That's how I met the manager for that security role that I moved into the company, actually. So just a side note there, it's funny that we're talking about it now. Think about it retrospective, that perhaps if I hadn't joined Toastmasters, I wouldn't have developed that relationship with that manager and then get comfortable enough to make the leap, right? But most definitely, I think.
It.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I just said I love it. I love the fact that you know, another benefit of Toastmasters is that it's like any sort of networking. It's like you never know when you go somewhere what you could be introduced to as far as like that can help you later in your career. I haven't been to an ISSA meeting, for example, in over a year and a half, and after we're done recording this, I'm actually going to one, so I'm actually excited. I'm trying. That's I don't do resolutions, but that's one of my goals for the year is to get out more. So everybody remember that too. It's just like you can network, and maybe that's how you can advance your career. But anyway, I digress. Go on.
No. So I think you're absolutely right on the listening portion, because it makes you, first of all, it exposes you to lots of different people, right? Which that's a great start, first for example, trying to get you out of that bubble. And then for me personally, I would say I am a relatively anxious person in social spaces or in social interactions, to be honest. I don't know if it's coming across right now, but I am. And
I am too, believe it or not. So I relate. I'm not a social butterfly, but I fake it well.
yeah, so I think for me, part of it was trying to get out of that bubble, trying to get out of my comfort zone. And as a so English is not my first language, for example, and at the same time, I thought it would help me, one, get out of my comfort level, network with other people, and then also practice my English public speaking skills, right? I think that definitely helped a lot. I also like research. I like learning new things, like I mentioned, and then having to prep for those speeches. It was fun just doing the research and write it up. It was a good challenge.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've been involved with Toastmasters, but I did find that at first I was anxious with it, and getting up in front of people and what are they going to think? And then you realize it's like, wait a minute, everybody's in the same boat and we're all helping each other.
Yes.
And that kind of carries over to social situations for me in general, or professional situations, even being in meetings and all that. It's like, I'm not the only one who's anxious here. Everybody's, probably got something going on in their mind. So let's just breathe and just go on with it. We're all human, It's kind of like this podcast here too. It's just like, we're just, just talking, having a good conversation. And it's like, whereas I was thinking about this beforehand, and it's before we actually started talking before recording. It's like every single time I do this podcast, I get nervous beforehand. But yet I wouldn't have done this podcast if it wasn't for Toastmasters. I get a certain amount of like confidence in the fact that just in communication and listening, and I have the pleasure of like hearing so many stories. I just think it's great. Not only do I get to share the stories, but I get to hear them firsthand, and that's what really keeps me going. And again, all that because of Toastmasters. So I one other security question, before I forget, because we're at different stages in our career, and that's another reason why I love doing this podcast. So I love to hear different views. In your opinion, what do you see as like the big thing to impact this in security, like say in the next 2 or 3 years? And what I mean by the big thing, it could be a threat, or it could be like a tool or a technology. Like probably if you had, like the last couple of years, anything generative AI probably, or AI in general, has been one of them. What are your thoughts on what's coming down the road for security?
Wow, I think we are at a point where we really need to start learning or thinking about security in a more macro space. I mean, we all, of course, we have the major threats, like you were mentioning. AI will definitely be one of them. And just to be clear, what I mean by that is improper implementation of AI, not necessarily AI itself, right?
Right.
And then hand to hand, and if not, perhaps a little bit above AI, because apologies for that, because AI would probably be a subset of this risk. But I would say geopolitical risk is getting increasingly important and impacts more and more every day our industry, I think, because the incentives and types of threat actors that we have out there vary just so much, right? From your super smart kid on a coffee place to now we're talking about nation states, and considering where all these tensions that are going on in a global economic and political realm will definitely have an impact on this, from nation states looking to retaliate, or maybe just opportunistic threat actors out there, right?
You bring up a very good point. And off to my right here, which you can't see on obviously because of the cameras, that I always have a news broadcast feed on from usually one of the major news sources, constantly for a couple of reasons. First of all, when I was a kid, I always did my homework with the TV on. It's just I'm more comfortable with there being some background stuff going on. But probably more importantly, particularly in the information security space, is exactly what you're talking about. We need to be very much aware of what's going on in the world, and also how people are being uh, fed the information, how they perceive what's going on, because that's where the threats happen. And it's unfortunate, but I'm looking on right now, and they're talking about the issues going on in Minneapolis. And a lot of what's happening in Minneapolis, without getting too deep into the woods, is fueled by perceptions on how people are fed information.
Yes.
And that's causing an issue. And we as security practitioners need to understand that that could then birth other threats in other areas to and the same thing with the geopolitical, the outside the United States stuff going on, certainly everything that's going on with Venezuela and now with Iran. The amazing stories that are coming out of Iran that we wouldn't be able to see because of having the visibility through Starlink. You're right on. And I think that as practitioners, we tend to forget that. We tend to we think of threat intel as CVSS scores and ISAC feeds and all of that. But really, we have to keep our head on a swivel with everything else out there.
Indeed. Yes. And to follow up on that, I think that brings me to the other big risk out there, right? Which would be misinformation and disinformation, for sure.
Yeah, and that's a tough one because I having grown up in the 70s myself, news back then used to be news, and now news is entertainment, and it's being catered towards different audiences and with different spins. I joke but don't joke in that I say I'm a regular consumer of Fox News and CNN because I like to see the different views on the same story. And that gives me the only opportunity for me to use my critical thinking to try to make a decision on my own. But yeah, it can be difficult and it can be very stressful. And we have enough stress in security as it is trying to keep things secure. And then we're trying to interpret, news and global events and all of that. And yet we need to decompress in a healthy manner. And I would like to ask you, what's one of the ways that you decompress from the stresses of our world?
That is a great question. I think I kind of vary on the different things that I do, especially depends on the season. What I mean is, for example, I love gardening. I love getting my hands in the dirt and I guess seeing the growth out of my work once I see plants growing and things like that, right? Of course. It gives me a lot of calm. But that's something I can only do certain time of the years, right? I can't be out in the garden in the middle of the winter. It's a little bit harsh.
Unless you have a greenhouse.
I guess. I guess. But I like listening to podcasts. I love music, just to get my creative juices out there. But most of all, I love traveling. I like diving. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this, I love learning new things. So that is, it might sound boring for some people, but I guess that's my way of getting distracted or balancing out the stress from work or life, and then trying to still find a way to grow.
Right, and that's the key word, balance, right there. Well, what future plans you have? I know you said that you're finishing up, or you're currently working on your master's at Georgia Tech.
So I am hopefully, I don't know this. I don't want to say this out here because what if I don't end up doing it, right? But I I am hoping I can get into a PhD program for AI. So I would definitely love to continue doing research, and I think as you've noticed, and in my LinkedIn profile, that does not mean I want to stop working. I definitely want to continue my work in security. I work for an awesome company. I have an amazing, incredibly experienced and talented team around me, and I hope to continue learning from them while I continue learning about AI and the academic realm, and how that is not just going to impact security from a control standpoint, but how can we improve our business processes, and also the experience of our analysts, of our engineers, of our CISOs out there, trying to make sense of the business risk and trying to optimize resources.
Awesome. Well, Tatiana, it's been an awesome conversation. Once again, I appreciate you taking the time to join me and chat this morning, and best of luck with everything going forward. Sounds like a lot of good stuff ahead.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg. It's been a pleasure.
And everybody, stay secure.